Hello, everyone. You're listening to Digital Builder, a podcast brought to you by Autodesk, made for construction professionals who want to hear from those on the forefront of construction technology. If you're looking for conversations centered around where the industry is going, this podcast is for you. Each episode will feature a conversation with a construction industry leader. Together, we'll dig in on themes related to connected construction and discuss where the future of the construction industry is headed. Now let's get started.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 21 of Digital Builder. I'm your host, Eric Thomas. This week, our focus turns to data strategies in construction, including a look at a recent global industry report we released in partnership with FMI titled Harnessing the Data Advantage in Construction. We'll use that study as a starting point to discuss common industry challenges with data and how to take advantage of this opportunity to drive improvements with construction data. To help tell this story, I'm joined by Jay Bowman, partner and managing director of Research and Analytics with FMI, and Andy Leek, Vice President of Technology and Innovation with PARIC. Andy is responsible for strategic planning, implementation of enterprise technology, and innovation at PARIC. His focus is on developing a proactive data-centric strategy to integrate cloud-based technology ranging from VDC to AI with processes that enable extended project teams to be more collaborative and efficient while leveraging critical data insights and dashboards from his connected data strategy. And Jay advises FMI's clients on a range of strategic decisions, including business diversification, market entry, and competitive positioning. He also co-authors FMI's annual U.S. and Canada Markets Construction Overview, the most widely read industry overviews in North America. And I've been collaborating with Jay for over 4 years now on research projects, and we've released 3 industry reports together. So thanks for joining me on the show, gents, and thank you for bearing with me on the lengthy introduction. I appreciate it.
No problem at all. Thank you, Eric. It is a pleasure to be on the show again, and also just the opportunity that we've had collaborating just on a range of topics, like you mentioned, over the last 4 years or so, whether it was, understanding how time is spent on projects, both, how it's spent efficiently and maybe how it's spent inefficiently, the impacts of collaboration and how that really can determine the success or failure of projects. And then really the most recent one, other than this one we're talking about today, the role of trust, not only in organizations, but between organizations. And it's not only been rewarding for me having spent that time with you on these individual studies, but also just seeing how, these past studies really contribute to and influence the approach to data and, how people put value on data in their own organizations.
I appreciate that, Jay, and you're absolutely right. It's so rewarding to have an opportunity to dive into these different topics and really find out the what and why behind them so we can offer, actionable guidance and insights for people out in the industry. It's been a real pleasure. And Andy, I know we haven't had an opportunity to collaborate together very much, but I'm super thankful that you're here sharing some of your wisdom about data strategies and all the great work you're doing over at PARIC.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you having me on the show. It's going to be a lot of fun to talk about this. We've spent a lot of time and energy developing a data strategy and helping to bring our organization along. It's quite the journey, not just for our company, but for the industry in general. So I think it's a really important topic and I'm excited to talk.
Yeah, there's a lot of people talking about this specifically right now, and I'm excited to pull out some more concrete, like what do we do? Like how do we do better? Because there's such an opportunity. But as I mentioned a moment ago, we'll start with a brief overview of the findings from that research report that Jay and I worked on, followed by a discussion with both guests about the state of the industry's data practices. And I think most listeners out there have seen that old chart that says construction doesn't embrace technology and we struggle with productivity improvements. But I really think that story has changed in the last 3 to 5 years specifically. We've had so much innovation and so many new things have come out, but also it's a large contributor to the massive amount of data that we have that we didn't necessarily have to think about how we were going to leverage and store and manage in, completely different ways. So with that said, Jay, I want to kick this off with you today. Can you share some of your highlights and any surprises that came out as we analyze the data for this big report?
Oh, absolutely. And I think, first of all, I would absolutely agree with you on the side of, where innovation has been across the construction industry and even more broadly speaking, the AEC industry. I mean, when you just look at venture capital investment, it's grown tenfold in the construction industry over the last decade. I don't know if there's another industry where there's really that much innovation going on. So it's actually a pretty exciting time for us in our industry. And you kind of mentioned, with the rise in data, and you're right. I mean, there's just been an exponential rise in the data capture among organizations in our industry. And I think it really kind of just start with there is that, how, a data strategy is really, it may seem optional today, but it's really going to be a requirement tomorrow. And I think that is because of what we've seen from the amount of data capture we've seen. But there was really three things, I think, from the study that stood out to me. And, the first one just being, again, it's that question of, is this optional or is this a requirement? Because the speed by which decisions are having to be made now, I mean, with the pressure on project schedules, budgets, and everything, the speed by which those decisions have to be made is just getting increasingly faster and faster, and frankly, pushed out more and more to those frontline individuals that don't really have the luxury of going back to somebody. In fact, in the study, one of the things that stood out was what was the greatest risk they saw to project success going forward. And it was the urgency by which decisions are having to be made. So that was clearly number one, and data has a strong role in helping making those decisions not only better, but faster. The second one was just the recognition, I think across the board, of the importance that data is going to really play in the success of their organizations and how things get done. I think it was over 50%, 55% probably that actually said, yeah, we recognize that this is the direction of the industry. So we're not really fighting any kind of old stigma of, hey, we're not going to embrace change. They recognize it. And then the third piece, I think along those lines, not only from the speed by which decisions have to be made, but that recognition, but just the realization of what kind of skills that means for people in our industry. One of the people I actually spoke with as part of the research that we were doing noted that something like 20% of employees, or only 20% of employees, might actually be data literate. So there's a huge sort of need from a new skill development. But those are sort of three big things that stood out to me, and combined what they spell is competitive advantage.
Yeah, I think it really highlighted a lot of things that we were talking about, or the people in the industry speak about, but we didn't have any real data points behind. And we surveyed nearly 4,000 people for this project. And through some of the calculations that, Jay, you so graciously helped us out with, we figured out that there's nearly a $1.84 trillion cost to construction in 2020 tied to either bad data, inaccurate data, or poor data. And we figured out that this could potentially be 165 million in revenue impact for GCs, with 88 billion globally in rework costs tied to bad data, which would shape up to about 7.1 million for that 100 billion or $1 billion general contractor. So when we start getting more granular about those big cost numbers, I think it really does combine here's an opportunity to really improve how your organization works and the margins that you have. And then also just makes it really clear that this is just a very important thing to focus on as we build how our industry consumes technology. And Andy, I know you weren't in the report with us, so I would still be interested to see your thoughts and hearing some of the things that Jay and I just shared, and then also just your insights tied to our industry's relationship with data at large.
Yeah, well, it's awesome to kind of be listening from that outside of the report piece, just there are so many parallels in what we're experiencing in the day-to-day. And, this is obviously a journey that's, it takes a while for the industry to evolve. I agree with Jay's sentiment around, there's a certain perception that the construction industry has been one of the last to kind of really adopt technology. I think it's been more the cadence or the fidelity of the data or the use of technology that has been slow to kind of really evolve. I mean, the design world kind of picked up after accounting, and I think it just took a little bit for that to find its way to the construction industry. But I think today really what it's coming down to now is, now that we have the technology, we're developing the data. Now it's coming to a point where people need to know whether or not they can trust it. Is the cadence high enough that they can get information in a reasonable amount of time? As Jay said, people need to be able to make decisions quickly. Job sites are highly dynamic. Design teams are moving at a rapid pace. Deadlines are ever evolving and never getting longer, always shorter. And so to maintain budget, maintain schedule, people need to make decisions immediately. And job sites are dynamic. weather can impact them, COVID, deliveries, where somebody parked a truck for the day, or there's all kinds of things that can impact the job site. And that knowing that context in the scheme of the project, the people that are on the ground on the job site know more about that job, or they should, than anyone. But they're obviously going to have blind spots. They can't consume all the information that's available to them all the time. And so that's where they're trying to find, okay, what tools do I have at my disposal today that I didn't have just a few years ago? Is the data reliable? Am I going to get it in time to make this really important decision? Or am I going to have to put off a part of the work or reschedule something on that project that is going to have a spiraling effect into the rest of the project? So, yeah, I see a lot of parallels in what the study was showing. And at the end of the day, it still comes down to the age-old issue with our industry is it's time and money. All the things we're doing have an effect. Our goal is to make sure that our clients have a good experience with us so that we can do repeat business. So understanding this industry, understanding our craft, and making sure that we're leveraging the latest technology, as Jay said, is absolutely going to be the new competitive advantage.
I'm glad to hear that your experience aligns with some of the findings that we had. And I want to come back to one thing you said that is incredibly important for me, and Jay and I have talked about this at length, is the trust piece. And Jay and I, we did another research project, as he had mentioned a few moments ago, about organizational trust, which you should absolutely check out if you're interested in this topic and listening to this podcast. But the relationship between trust and data is incredibly important. And Jay, I was hoping you could share more about the challenges tied specifically to data inaccuracy and how it did impact the way people trust the data to inform their decisions.
It's a great question. When you ask that question, actually, it makes me think of a mentor of mine who often, when he talked about trust, he really kind of broke it down into two components. He would say it's about competency and it's about consistency. Competency meaning that, okay, I can trust that you can do the job, that you're going to be accurate, all those types of things. Then consistency, that you're going to do that over and over and over again. And I don't think it's too much of a stretch to kind of take those two sort of descriptors, if you will, or characteristics of how trust is built, and now put it in this sort of data environment. So if you kind of start with the sort of, I'll say, the consistency piece of it, right? And maybe this gets back to a little bit what Andy was talking about. I mean, there is a large percent of the data that's just not usable. And I want to distinguish between what we mean by, not being usable and not necessarily bad. Let's put the bad off to the side for now. I mean, there is bad data, as you mentioned, and it costs the industry a tremendous amount of dollars every year. But if we just talk about just the usable component, again, from the survey results, about half the respondents, a large percentage of the respondents said that, maybe about 50% or so is not even usable, meaning you can't access it right away. It's not really in a consumable or understandable format, or it can't really do anything with it. It doesn't really have it's not actionable in that regard. And so with that kind of undermines that consistency, meaning that I don't know if the information I'm going to get this time is going to work, or if it's going to be the right information this time. And that undermines that trust in the data. It's just that inconsistency. And then the competency piece, now that's where I think the bad data comes in. And about half of the respondents said that anywhere from 20 to 50% of their data is bad. I mean, meaning that, there is an inherent sort of error in the data, the wrong information, it was put in wrong, whatever it may be. And so I think that, those things absolutely have to be sort of addressed, if you will, from a trust perspective, that the data is going to be accurate and that it's going to be consistent, meaning no matter when and how I access it, it's right every time. Absolutely necessary, because you go back to that trust study we had, you'll recall two of the hallmarks of really high trust organizations where they emphasized collaboration and they shared information openly and easily. And data, in my opinion, that's why I say all these studies that we've done, you can see where they all interconnect here, is a key component to that.
Yeah, I think data is the driver of the conversation now. And Andy, I feel like you may have been burned in the past on some bad data, because you were nodding your head as Jay was sharing some of his opinions on this one. And I think we all have. And it's a hard thing to sidestep sometimes, because if you get burned really, really badly when you were confidently using data that turned out to be inaccurate, it really increases your hesitancy to leverage data in an actionable and quick way in the future, and to build that trust back up organizationally in that you've built your data standards and your structure in a way that makes it so your project teams can go, heck yeah, I looked at this dashboard, it said X, and it means that it's X. Like it's the ideal state, but we're not all always there, unfortunately.
Absolutely. It's as I said earlier, it's a bit of a journey. Part of the use of technology as we're evolving today and where we're headed is, one, missing data is almost as bad as misentered data or what have you. And so having gaps is always a thing that you got to overcome. And so it's a matter of, well, can I trust the data? Well, you can trust the data that's there, but the data that's not there, well, I don't know that you can or can't. So that's part of the journey, is understanding that. And, one of the things that we've had to work through over, the last, 10 some odd years has been, first, what are the questions you want answers to? Do we even have the data to back it up? And if we don't, we need to figure out a way to start collecting it. That may be helpful in 3 months or 6 months. It's probably not helpful today. But then once we have the data, make sure that you have a way to test the data, and make sure that what you're curating for the user base is actually usable information. And it's timely, like I said earlier, like the cadence of the updates and things like that have to be at a pace where the team's getting some value out of it, and it's not after the fact. Because at that point, you're just writing parking tickets, and nobody really cares about the data. Where I think that's important to understand too is there's different data for different parts of the project, different phases of the project. Some data is really critical in that critical decision-making moment of, do we order the guys to come on site to pour concrete or not? Versus, do we have the photo that back up some sort of litigation thing, or we're modifying schedule? What's telling us to change that schedule? Is it weather, or is it shipping and logistics? What's driving that decision? And so that's where the trust part becomes the most important. Like Jay said, one is making sure that the data that's there is reliable and that it's actually all there. The other aspect is when it doesn't work. And I'll tell you, there's two aspects of that. One is the data strategy is constantly evolving. So I'll tell anybody today, your data strategy today will be different 12 months from now. It probably will be different 90 minutes from now. But ideally not. You want consistency in what you're reporting on so that you can look back over a longer period of time. But it's going to evolve. And so developing a data strategy that is nimble enough to allow you to make some tweaks and add some additional data points without losing everything that you've built up to this point, because you don't want to lose all that historical data. It's a really critical part of what we're doing. But on the rare occasion that something may go sideways, and that never happens in construction, but on the rare occurrence, you are going to have some rebuilding to do. If you have a user and they're looking at a particular data set for quality or safety or cost or what have you, and something went wrong, you may spend the next 6 weeks building back their trust that, yes, I double checked the numbers, we triple checked them. And it's going to take a while. And that's where setting expectations with your team, I think, is one of the most important aspects of this. Is it is a bidirectional relationship. They're looking for information and answers from whoever's creating the data or presenting the data, and you're looking for guidance from them on what's going to help them make important project decisions. So letting them know, hey, we don't have everything perfect. It's going to be a little bit of a bumpy road. Please bear with us. That only builds you a little cushion, but you should take what you can get.
I appreciate that insight, and we'll get into some of the how do we do this better in a few minutes. So for those out there listening, we'll have some actionable guidance coming soon. So please stay tuned, because I think it's the important half of this conversation. But a theme that comes up on this show a lot, and just something I think about pretty frequently when it comes to construction technology and data, is the balance between the quantity of the data captured versus the quality of the data captured. And the increased innovation, I think, is actually contributing to this noise a little bit, because it's harder to figure out how to make sure everything is seamlessly moving from place to place unless you've really built yourself on some sort of, real holistic platform solution. But Andy, I'm curious, how have you found the balance when implementing technology at PARIC between the quantity and quality discussion?
So two very important aspects of this, entirely different ways, right? So the quantity of it is the first part you got to tackle. I think the quality part kind of comes with this part, but the quantity is the first thing, because a human being can only consume so much information at a time. And they've got other things going on besides just looking at a report or a matrix or a bar graph. So how you can serve that information up in a way that's helpful, but doesn't take away from their focus on the day-to-day. The way we approached this was to create curated dashboards for a project team. And we try to curate them based on their role in the phase of the job so that there's not endless, bar graphs and pie graphs for them to try and noodle all the way through all the information. They're looking for key insights. What are some indicators of, hey, this could be good or bad? So simple things like stoplight coloring, red bad, green good, yellow, probably on its way to bad. Simple things, but they become muscle memory. And once people get used to that, it's something they can rely on. Then you can start to focus in on the quality. I think quality is more perception of, really noodling through what are the questions they need answers to. Okay, so it's one thing to understand that a cost book item might be a little high or a little low, but why? Why is it off? And what contextual data needs to go along with that to help them understand, yeah, it's off, but it's off because shipping was delayed. But they're going to give us a 50% discount down the road. So, whatever's going to be that's going to help us out long-term, these are long-term relationships, generally speaking. So the quantity of it, I think we try to manage that by just how we curate it in a way that they don't have to go run reports or search for it or go dig into the weeds and try and get it. It's simplistic dashboards in the most simplistic way. I've already spent more time describing it than what we try to put on a dashboard, honestly. The quality, I think, comes back to driving into what are the questions they need answers to.
You're super on point here, Andy. And I think it's so important to be asking those big picture questions about, like, what do we actually want to achieve here? Because with this influx of new technology, if you're consuming without thinking about that end goal, it really contributes to what Jay and I discovered doing this research is there's a common held feeling between stakeholders, whether they're at a big company or a small company or somebody who's further along in their data maturity, as far as just experiencing decision paralysis on deciding what the heck do we do, because there's so much stuff and it seems really overwhelming. And so, like, we'll get into some of the nuance there, but narrowing your focus a bit always helps in making those improvements, but making sure you do that under the umbrella of intentionality, and then also I think just standardization in how you capture and consume your data is so terribly important, because it makes it so it's difficult to look organizationally too, especially if your projects are doing everything in a really different fashion. So that's when you back up into your organizational data strategy and you've got everything spelled out very clearly. It leaves less room for interpretation, ensures that you've got, something that's easier to work with and gives you what you need at the end of the day. So I think we've covered a really nice foundation of what the state of construction data looks like right now. Plus, we learned a little bit about the report, which if you're listening, you should absolutely go download it, because there's so much insight there. And regurgitating statistics and data points at you is not an interesting way to kick off a podcast. So I definitely encourage you to take a peek at the final report. It's a lot of fun. And there'll be links to that in the show notes as well. So it'll be easy to find. And if you're a podcast fan, there's an audiobook version, not read by myself, somebody more professional than me. So if you want to, work out and listen to construction data, that's a great way to get going. But we highlighted earlier that across nearly 4,000 people we surveyed, they identified that 1 out of 3 decisions that resulted in poor outcomes were caused by using bad data, which is a really alarming statistic to see. So, Jay, I was hoping you could tell us a little bit more about how our listeners can ensure that the data that they're capturing is not bad. Like, where do they start?
Well, I think this goes back to something I want to piggyback on that Andy mentioned. It's the data integrity, right? I mean, that's number one. And I think one of the common things that we heard, whether it was through the interviews or through the survey, was that there's probably 3 really common challenges that impacted that data integrity. And one was, I'll call it, for the lack of a better word, multiple project inputs. So here I'm talking about things like spelling. I mean, we had people who tell us that you would not realize that there are 30 different ways that you can spell the name of one supplier, because sometimes you can use all capital letters, and sometimes you use, just the regular, capital at the beginning of the sentence. Sometimes it's corp, sometimes it's, corporation. But those things, although they seem minor, actually added up from just a, those multiple project inputs, that gets back to one of the challenges I said, whether it's, is it usable information? If I'm looking for a company, I think it only shows up once and it shows up, multiple times. The other one was just multiple processes. I mean, people mentioning, hey, we found out we had 20 different QA processes. How are we capturing data? We had a different process almost every single time. And the last one being multiple platforms, where we were letting different people choose different software, different hardware, different approaches. Some people are using spreadsheets. And that gets back to that just disconnected component of it, which can contribute to bad data, just in terms of how we start to share data across. But I think one of the other things that really stood out to me, and it also kind of gets back to what you were talking about with the data paralysis, was that almost everybody, to a man or a woman, said that really you have to start small. And I didn't really start small, but start in one place. You can't really go solve all of this at one time because I think it's just too much. But picking that one area, where you can kind of crawl, walk, run, but really just standardizing how that data is captured, creating a common data environment. Those things, in my opinion, stood out more than anything as what could really start to address some of the data integrity issues and trying to limit that amount of bad data.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Jay, is that narrowing of the focus, not necessarily to be dismissive of all the parts of your business that could benefit from improvements, but picking something that's easier to tackle, especially something you have a considerable quantity of data that hopefully is good for that starting point to make refinements, and you prove that test case to your team and your organization, and then suddenly you've got more of a green light to start making those changes elsewhere and building into that data strategy incrementally, instead of going boom, like we're doing everything today, because that's just a little bit too much to bite off, especially if you're a very large organization. Andy, do you have any additional thoughts there? You might have captured some of this earlier, but getting to the root of that bad data, I think, is something that everybody should aspire to that's listening to this.
Yeah, I think, to Jay's point a second ago, just you've got to start. I mean, if you haven't started by now, you're already behind. Like, you got to start small. To me, it's focus in on some area that you have some data that's measurable, valuable data. I'll tell you, for us, we started in two basic areas. One was financial and the other was safety. And those are the two simplest places. Now, financial is more complicated, but we tried to focus in on a very particular area and kind of grow from there. But on safety, it was, again, it's not just the data. It's, as Jay mentioned, multiple platforms. You have multiple people that are curating that information or collecting it or hopefully collecting it and managing the data standards. And there's just a lot that goes into it. And then how you're going to get it out to people. There's as much a logistical challenge to this as there is a data problem to this. So it's not necessarily bad data. It's managing the whole thing. And it's a much bigger effort than just rolling up a spreadsheet and turning it into a graph. There's a lot more to it.
And that's too, I think, when Andy mentioned, your data strategy is likely to change 12 months. That's not a bad thing, because you're if you start small, you start that one point. And I think in the case studies that we did, that was the common thread through everybody. No one tried to solve everything at one time. They chose one area of the organization where they could apply a solution. And so to Andy's point, it's not only okay that data strategy might change 12 months from now, it should change 12 months from now, because you're learning, you're adding to that body of knowledge, and you just kind of incrementally find, well, where's that next thing? What did I learn from here that's going to open up something else? And it should be, because the world is always changing anyway, and we're just always kind of adjusting to it with those strategies.
Jay, I always tell people, the more I learn, the less I know. I mean, because the more you dig into it, it's like peeling back layers of the onion, and if I can do this, well, can I do this? And if I had this one extra data point, then all of a sudden I can start to tie these things out in a different way. And that's, it's amazing. Like, the more you dig into data, the more you learn.
Mm-hmm. That's when you've just identified yourself as a technology nerd, Andy. It's so easy to go down the rabbit hole on this stuff, though, because as soon as you build that base layer, then you start going, oh, I can do this now that this part of my technology stack and my data is just dialed now. So it opens up new possibilities. So there's so much more. And Andy, you mentioned one other thing a moment ago that I'd like to come back to as well, is there's a human element in here that we really need to remember as we think about how we work on this challenge organizationally as in an industry as well, because this data conversation is not only I need dashboards, I need something better than spreadsheets, I need information. The improvements to data strategies and the ability to consume it better and make actionable insights quickly really just impacts how people get their work done. I mean, we're all very familiar with long hours in the construction industry. I worked them myself many, many days when I was still working for a couple GCs. And I think anything we can do to improve the human aspect of getting their work done, and then also building that foundation to leverage more advanced technologies to augment what the people are doing, it's such a win for this industry at large. And it's a challenge. It's not like you're going to go, oh, I want to use machine learning, and then I didn't capture any data, it's all in spreadsheets, you're going to do that tomorrow. But if you build that foundation correctly and you think about those incremental changes that are attainable to make, you can look at that future state and go, I can make this better and I can support my team better. And it all really does start with the data. So we've said data about 10,000 times on this conversation. We'll keep it going, but it's just so important. But Jay, I want to come back to the interviews that you mentioned again. And I think there were so many strong nuggets that you got during those conversations that I was hoping you could share some more of the success stories, or just what really did work for the people that you were speaking to. I know we've covered some of the challenges and the bad, but it'd be great to just hear a few more examples of, we did X and it worked really well and this is fantastic, because it's a challenge, but it's an opportunity at the same time, I guess is the right phrasing from my perspective.
I mean, in the interviews, I mean, because these were done, across multiple, geographies across the globe, it was interesting to get different perspectives from, people in different parts of the world, even though I would say that there was still sort of a commonality to some of the issues and some of the solutions. And as you pose that question to me, I would say maybe there's 2 or 3 that stand out, but I could bucket these into, one was a story about the what. What did a data strategy do for their organization? And the other 1 or 2 I might share with you is more along the how. How did they actually make this work? And so if I start with the what, and this again is a continuation of really a lot of the same themes that we've been bringing up about, that there is a time element to this, that you learn from the data. And that's part of the beauty of it, in my opinion, is that as one thing occurs and you see what that does, it opens up an insight to something else. And next thing you know, you have a string of pearls, to really look at in terms of all the things that are quite possible. But in one of them, an individual I spoke with was talking about how one project is not enough, meaning, trying to collect that data in one project. When you start to, combine that project data across projects and even across other different aspects, that's that time element. It's not an overnight fix. But one of the areas that they had sort of migrated to over time was combining their project cost data with some of the damages data that they were collecting. So, looking for correlations and saying, well, what can we find from this? And they were able to actually take some of the, I'll say, the average number of damages or defects that they experienced, per sort of a dollar sort of amount, if you will. And essentially we're able to start to say, okay, we're not getting to necessarily the realm of predictive analytics here, but at least a red flag that starts to say, hey, when we start to see the number of damages or defects per dollar, reach this amount or whatever that amount was, it just sort of flew, it kind of triggered something for them, kind of like what Andy was saying, kind of red, green, yellow. And it allowed them sort of address those things earlier, because they knew when they got over a certain amount, you started to run over budget, over schedule, whatever. And so in a way, they were creating rules, if you will, that served almost like pre-decision making, right? It takes some of that cognitive sort of stress out, because the rule is already looking for some of these things with all the other things I got to be thinking about. If I'm a project manager on a day-to-day basis, having those rules in place to kind of take some of that cognitive load off and be looking for those things was super valuable to them because of the cost savings that they were able to realize as a result of that. And I think that also just gets back to one of these other things. We are already looking at an industry where we're working on such thin margins. And we hear people talking all the time about looking for profit pockets, from a construction kind of contractor perspective. This is probably one of the best profit pockets out there, because you're plugging holes basically in the bottom of the bucket to increase that profit side. On the other side, the how, that people mentioned, I talked about the one person I spoke with that brought up the whole issue of data literacy. And again, sorry to keep going back to things that Andy said, but there really is a common theme here, was the realization that having the data, being able to run some of these calculations and these correlations and everything else was fine, but somebody has to consume it. And so that data literacy, the way they sort of addressed some of that was just in how do they present it? Red, yellow, green. How do you make it intuitive? If you're trying to make some really fancy, analytic type of report, the likelihood of being used was really poor. They had to find ways that it was instantaneously understood. I can see what it means, so I can avoid those bad decisions. And, kind of maybe along that same line, we found that another organization using things like iPads and tablets rather than trying to push out some software on a laptop was a much better approach because people were more intuitively able to use the tablet or the laptop compared to if they were trying to just use another program.
Jay, I really appreciate you sharing the insight there with, just the people that we spoke to and the success that they've had. And I want to come back to the first example that you've got, and I'm going to kick the question to Andy because I think he might have a good answer for us on this one. But I think it's important to identify how we can start making a pivot from only having our data support in the moment project level decisions and using that data and moving it into an environment where you can leverage data at that organizational level. Andy, do you have any thoughts there on steps that you can make to start making that transition where you can take your data from project to project instead of it being captured once and then never looked at again?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think this goes back to the data strategy. And this is something that we were very planful of out of the gate. I can't tell you that it went perfect. And I can tell you that there were technology challenges along our way that prevented us from doing some of the things we really wanted to do. Because as Jay mentioned, it's not just one platform we're using. We're using a couple dozen platforms that are collecting data that we want to have fed to the project teams or fed across the organization. And so the approach for us out of the gate, was one, we want to make sure we had data collected. The easiest way to collect that was hopefully in the cloud or in a centralized location. But beyond that, the data had to be cross-project in nature. So whatever data we were collecting at the project level, we ultimately wanted it to roll up to a cross-project level so that we could really understand, okay, well, we're having quality issues or we're having safety issues. What kind are they? And then if we have a consistency that we're constantly having issues with people wearing hard hats or something like that, that we're able to identify we have a training issue or opportunity, right? Or we're seeing issues in people getting payment on projects or something like that. Understanding, is it systematic or is it a systematic issue on a project level, or is it symptomatic of an organizational problem in the way that we're managing reporting on data or the cadence of the reporting or how we're following up? So there's a lot of that goes into the data strategy itself. And I wanted to make sure I touched on this a second ago as Jay was talking. The industry is all abuzz about data and analytics and dashboards and everything, and reports or emails or however we communicate are all just vehicles for sharing the information, right? And how we do that, really you can kind of approach that in a way of how am I going to meet somebody where they're at and hopefully evolve them over time? Because they're not going to use it at the most simplistic level. They're not going to use it when it gets more complicated. And what we learned in some of our work has been we developed some dashboards with some really simplistic KPIs. And then over time, there were more questions that were asked. So it wasn't so much a data strategy that had to evolve. It was, okay, we've hit a certain level of comprehension of using the data. Now we want to do more. Now we want to know more. Now we want to know the why, or we want to know how to prevent something. So there's, one of the things you brought up a second ago was understanding or kind of evolving people through the use of data. helping people understand there are different types of analytics. And some of them are telling you what happened. They're the parking ticket or the police report. Some of them are telling you kind of why it happened. Well, they parked in front of a parking meter. And then there's understanding more of, the predictive or the prescriptive, and understanding what's likely to happen. What would happen if we did this and prevented it? Hopefully, we could save money and fill, some of those holes. So, we're constantly looking for ways to avoid project fade to go along with those profit pockets, because then you actually realize the full value of your effort in the project, that your customer, your client is getting the full value of you delivering a project on time and on budget. And then in return, by working smart and communicating really well with your team, you're able to recognize the full profit on the project as well, which helps everybody. So I think it's really important to understand that the data piece of it is really driving all these other aspects of the project.
I really like the phrase profit pockets, by the way. I'm going to steal that. I hadn't heard that one before, and I'm going to capture it and start using it on the show with some more regularity. So those out there listening, forward to me to stealing that one. But I'm going to float this question out to both of you. Whoever wants to jump in on it first is completely okay, because I'm not sure which one of you is going to have a stronger opinion. But how does the baseline that we're building here with the data strategy and intentionally cleaning our data lead into some of this more advanced technology like artificial intelligence, machine learning, predictive analytics, virtual reality? I just love both of your gut check on like how this all interplays and what the future or today brings, because this is stuff that's being used right now in the industry, as some of our recent episodes would highlight very clearly.
I think it's how do you create a foundational education, right? And it's probably a silly way to describe it, but if I'm trying to teach someone to drive a car, right, I'm not going to tell them how an internal combustion engine works and how the metal comes together and is formed. I can explain to them that the gas pedal and the steering, and this is how you make sure you go, and the brake. And so I think in some ways, what we've been talking about so far today, that's where we want people to start. Artificial intelligence, machine learning, that's understanding how the engine works. That's, that's going from algebra 1 to calculus or whatever. And so I think it's necessary that you think that you're ever going to get to that stage or just jump in at that stage. I think you're misguided. We have to start at sort of that ground level. And I think that's what this represents. And the only other thing I would say is, just so that people are clear, the data strategy is not the end goal. The data strategy is the vehicle by which we're trying to accomplish some other objective for the organization, which is either better decisions. And the reason we're trying to get better decisions is so that projects are successful, not only for our clients, but for our company as well. And we just have to keep those things, I think, in mind.
Yeah, so I agree with Jay. I think an important aspect of this too is, as I kind of sit here and think about this, is we've been very purposeful about having an integrated approach to technology. And what I mean by that is we have data coming from so many different places. You can get value out of one platform reporting on one thing, like I said, whether it's cost or safety or something like that. But then what happens if you start to you mix them together? What other insights can you start to get? And thinking beyond, right now we're trying to get the HI to keep up with all the data. And the AI and the ML aspect of this, machine learning in and of itself sounds like a big scary word. It's really just computers learning how to, more efficiently process data so that we can consume it more effectively. The same thing with artificial intelligence is, we got to teach the AI to figure out what we want to know to some degree. And then at some point that kind of flips to the other side where all of a sudden, in some utopian world, we're just inundated with so much valuable data. We're going to go buy lottery tickets every day. But until we get to that point, let's learn together with some of that. Take some of the scariness of the black box away. I think the way Jay put it was perfect. Let's teach people how the fundamentals of how to drive the car right now. We'll get to the other part, because as soon as we have that foundation, if they start to understand the basics, then they're going to go, okay, now I want to add on some new Chrome parts. I want to do some more exciting things. I want more ways to slice and dice the data or drill down into it. And then their nerd starts to show, right? And when we're all nerding out together, geeking out together, that's great. But at that point, we all have we've level set together. We're using the same terminology. we're referencing the same data sets and saying, yeah, I know when we got this data, it came from here. And I know when it's going to get updated. And I know how much I can trust of that data. That is half the battle. And, once we get over that hill, then we're on to greater and greater things. So, as Jay said a second ago, is let's make progress. Let's move people forward. We're never going to be done. We might be substantially complete, but we're never really done, and it's going to evolve. So I think that's the great part about, being a human, is that you learn some, you go apply it, you learn some more, you go apply that, and it's a practice. So I think that's what's exciting about it to begin with.
Yeah, and having that safe space to actually go out and do that, where you catch people if there's a misstep, but you're all learning at the same time to improve that overall strategy. But Jay, I really like your analogy. I'm going to steal that one from you too, because it's so important to ensure, especially early on when we're starting this process, that people have the information they need and understand and is relevant without giving them the how does a combustion engine work? How do I change my tires? How do you do all this stuff? Not that information doesn't have value, but you're providing it at the moment that it's relevant for them and helpful and isn't overwhelming. So it's that iterative process. And then once you do lay that foundation, and then you get to qualify to everybody, like these more advanced technologies that we can now start implementing, like machine learning or artificial intelligence, they're not scary tools and they're not replacements. They're augmentations to what humans already do well. And they also capture the elements of things that humans do not do well. Like look at 25,000 site photos to identify site safety incidents. Like if you tell your, head of safety that that's their job tomorrow, they're not going to be very happy with you. But, this advanced technology can really augment in a way that makes us more efficient and then also safer at the end of the day too, which is obviously paramount for our industry. I've got another question for both of you, because I think it's all interconnected to data literacy and in understanding what to do with this technology and the information available, and then also how. So Andy, do you have any guidance based on what you've been doing at PARIC or any industry best learnings on how we can make meaningful improvements in data literacy for those out in the construction space?
Eric, that's a really great question. And for a couple of reasons, not to qualify your question, but I will tell you that, the audience is really important to understand. Like you said earlier, it's all human for the most part, right? People are using this information or they're not. And there's a key distinction there. And so what I think we've learned, or what I've learned at least, is you have to meet people where they're at to a certain degree so that you can get their buy-in in the process. You got to get them comfortable with the terminology. You start throwing acronyms at people and they turn off immediately. And it's like, BIM, done. It's like, no, it's okay. It's just one word. It's just one acronym, I promise. Then you throw up a word cloud with 50 of them and the whole room just evacuates. Like, there's no way. So you got to, I don't want to oversimplify it, because it's important that people understand it is serious stuff, right? But at the same time, you've got to meet people where they're at. It's, like I said earlier, it's a journey. We're all on it. It's all philosophical, I know. But once people start to have a feeling, and if you're leading this type of effort within your organization, you have got to be consistent. You have to constantly be beating the same drum week after week, using the same terminology, putting it in front of them, speaking to it on a, whether it's on a presentation board or on a dashboard or on a piece of paper in front of them. Whatever means connects is consistency. Once they get more comfortable that BIM is a thing, it's been around for 40 years, it's a thing. What does it mean? I've heard, like Jay said earlier, there's 30 different ways to spell a company's name. There are 50 different ways to figure out what an acronym stands for, the worst of which is to Google it. So put a data dictionary or a basic list of here's the things we're going to be talking about, and give it to people ahead of a meeting. Give it to them ahead of a presentation. Let them know what they're getting themselves into. This, it kind of helps that, one, it's not a surprise when they hear it for the first time and they're like looking at their cheat sheet trying to find it. But then the more you can talk about it, as you're going through it, the first time you walk somebody through a dashboard or report, help them understand what they're looking at. Why the things are here, and make sure that you constantly put yourself out there. I'll tell you, like, the vulnerability piece is really important to this, but you're never going to get their buy-in if they don't think that they can kind of like chip the edges a little bit and let them know that it's, it's not like a locked concrete box. If they've got questions, let them ask. let them challenge you. They don't believe your data? Great. Now, you want to hopefully have the right answers, but if you don't, that's okay. And you may not. You likely won't have all the answers. And being comfortable with that is really critical, because once you know that, then you start to understand what are the questions they really want answers to. Challenge them right back. You don't like this? Why? How can I make it better? And then make sure, again, you kind of manage expectations. Okay, I hear you. This isn't perfect. This is what we have today, and this is kind of how it works. Give me 3 months. Build in some space. It will take longer than you think. But let them know you are going to make improvements on it. And as Jay said earlier, the consistency and the competency to actually come through is critical to the trust, because it's not just the data they're trying to trust. It's you they're trying to trust. And it takes a while to build both of those. So
I think you hit the nail on the head there. And you've got to take your people along with you on this journey. It's not a prescriptive action where you show up and go, hey, everybody, we have a data strategy now, so you're going to do this. Because regardless of if it's the best data strategy that applies to every nuance of your business, you could just brilliance. Like you show up with brilliance, but if you bring it to the table in the wrong way, you're still going to have hesitancy and resistance. So it's a conversation and making sure you're checking in along the way. So Andy, I really like your approach there. And the other cool thing that's kind of happening now is the different technology that we're implementing either on projects or in the office. Like 10 years ago, this was all the realm of the VDC team, where it was like advanced tech. Oh, the VDC guys do that. I don't mess with that. I don't know anything about that. And that's a totally different conversation now, because the technology is accessible. It's easier to use and understandable. The UIs are better. The gadgets that we have are great. And if you have the right tool in the right superintendent's hand, I don't care if he's never sent an email in his entire life. If you can show him that it adds value and it's easy to use, you can get him to use it. It's just empowering him in the right way, instead of showing up and going, here's an iPad, all the stuff is on there that you need. You're good now? It's like, no, he's not. Like, you got to help him along the way. Jay, do you have any thoughts there from any clients you've worked with in the past, as far as just ensuring that data literacy piece is so important? Because I think it's kind of the other crux. Like, it's the other part of the data conversation. We can have the best data in the world, but if those out there don't know how to leverage it or use it, so what?
Real simply, it comes down to two things. One is understanding the relationship, and it's no different than normal literacy, right? Meaning, okay, I understand how these letters come together. These letters form a word, and these words come together and they make a sentence, and the sentence comes together and make a paragraph. And, I understand the relationship. And to me, on the data literacy side, it's the exact same thing. It's understanding how this set of data and this set of data tell me something of value. The relationship and the connective tissue is where all the value resides in this. And to be able to understand that when this happens, we get this result, whether it's predictive or trying to understand, all that's so important. And then the last thing is, I think where people have been more successful is they realize that all this is what is a do with, not a do to. And the distinction between that is, here's what I do with this to make my life easier, make my jobs better, versus something that's being pushed down. This is, you shall do this, without any explanation of that literacy side of understanding, well, why am I doing this? Why do I care about these things? And how do I understand that relationship?
I really like that. It's just a really deliberate process to bring all of this together in a way that impacts the bottom line of the business, but also impacts your people at the same time. Like, it's a very important relationship and balance to maintain. And everybody's sick of talking about the labor shortage, but if you're not taking care of your people in this particular moment, they're going to go somewhere else, and replacing them is going to be an absolute burden. And if you want to go back into the trust dance, Jay and I did a lot of work trying to figure out how much that actually costs you to replace those top tier talent. It's not a small number, so go back and check out our trusted construction report from 2018 if you're interested. But I want to get the crystal balls out now, and so let's pretend that harnessing the data advantage in construction was the lever to pull in the industry, and we're all jumping on the data strategy train, and we've got all these improvements. And of course, I recognize that is very aspirational, but hopeful at the same time. Like, where would you guys say or feel like we're going to be in, say, 10 years' time when it comes to our relationship with data and our ability to effectively leverage it? Andy, could you kick this one off for us?
Well, I'll tell you, I wish that I had all the answers to this question. I can't tell you exactly what's going to happen in 10 years. My insight tells me that if we're embracing all the technology that we have today to its fullest capacity and realize, the bell curve, everything's supposed to just be taken off vertical. We should be at a point where not only is the data getting better and the insights getting better, but the use of it is getting better. I would like to think we get to a point at some point in the distant future where the people, so we're focused on the people in terms of helping them, do a better job, be able to rest easier, they're making the right decisions, make sure they can go home on time and watch their kids play baseball, have a life, like people work to live. They don't live to work. So that's, to me, my goal has always been, how do we get people home on time so they go spend time with their families and do things like that? So to me, if we're really leveraging the technology, we might get to a point where, if COVID has taught us nothing else, it's taught us that we can work remote. You can't build remote. You can prefab remote. You can't build on-site remote. So there's not a one-size-fits-all answer to all of this, but we may get to a point where the concept of remote project management becomes more of a reality. We're already doing aspects of it, having job site cameras and 360 cameras and drones flying sites and scanning for not only earthwork but progress, and being able to scan back and forth and look at what happened last week, what happened this week, logistically, what's on site, what's ready to go, where's the tower crane, all that kind of stuff. I think we're going to get to a point in the future where the AI is going to start to learn more about our creature habits. Like, what do we constantly do on job sites? When it's on the outside of the building, when it's on the inside of the building, when it's a big site project, when it's not. What are the common things? Like, that's what I'm expecting from the AI. I want it to start seeing the things that are blind spots to us. I think we get to that point. We may be working from a beach one day. I don't know that all of us will be, but we got to get to a point where the technology, for the longest time I've told people, if you're expecting technology to make your life easier, you're looking at it wrong. It should make your life better. It should make your decisions more sound. Easier will come with better, but it's going to take a while. And so to me, that's kind of where the opportunity lies right now is let's get better. Let's get adopted. Let's grow proficiency in the tools that we have because they're different. This is going to sound super nerdy, Eric, but you might want to pitch this one or trademark it for later. But Excel, of yesterday, has always been the tool that people leaned on. But I'll tell you, whether it's Power BI or one of these other BI type solutions, BI tools are becoming the new Excel, because what you could do in an Excel file, in a spreadsheet, was just digitally what you were doing in a paper notebook that our field guys had before, or our accountants had in the past. But BI tools are quickly becoming the Excel file or the Excel tool of tomorrow, because not only can you start to analyze specific data, but now you can start to think about it in a bigger context across one project or multiple projects, or one scope of work or multiple scopes of work. And that's where the deeper insights start to come from. So I know it's kind of probably a longer answer than you were expecting, but that's kind of how I see it.
It's good. It's an evolution, really. Like you're absolutely right. Like Excel is still an important tool in the right circumstance, but we were beholden to it because there weren't custom tools that suited our industry for such a long time. Like fortunately, that has changed now, and we can leverage new technology, be more effective and collaborative, and we don't have a myriad of Excel documents living on a Microsoft server somewhere that dies in the middle of a bid day, and the drama continues. So we're past those days, thankfully.
The data's no longer locked up for an Excel cowboy to own it. Their computer goes down, you've lost all that information. That's the value of using tools that are more platform oriented is, you may have some bad data, but at least you don't lose it. And you know where it came from, and you can go back and clean it up if you need to, but you don't lose it. And you don't want it all, and a lot of data is not useful for long term. But what you have today, you definitely want to make sure that it's there and reliable. So
Yeah, you've got that accurate and solid common data environment to build on. And I liked your point too about that working remotely. And obviously construction is always going to be a blended approach because we're building things. Like you have to be there to build the thing to a degree, regardless of what's going on. But one of the silver linings that's come out of the pandemic is I think an honest relationship with where remote work fits into the different industries that exist in the world. So it's going to be different for construction than it is going to be for information technology, et cetera, et cetera. But in addition to it making our time more efficient, it also has opened up potential access for opportunities to a wider scope of people. So you could have an absolute data nerd that lives in Idaho and is just going to crush your, dashboards and all of this stuff, and your project's in San Diego, and that's okay. And now they have access to that job and they didn't have it before. So that's, I think, one nice thing that we can kind of build on and iterate. And it's going to be a bit of a fluid process for our industry specifically, but it's an important one. So, Jay, if you're getting your crystal ball out and looking at, 10 years down the line, what do you think is coming our direction?
Well, I think kind of to piggyback on the conversation, I think tool is the operative word here, because I don't think it's 100%, but I'd say 99.9% of the people in this industry are in it because we love what we do. I mean, we love building. And, you think about ConExpo or any of these other big events where the latest kind of new tool is out there and everybody wants to use it because not necessarily because of that tool itself, it's because of what it allows me to do. I really don't want a hand shovel because I really like digging with my fingers, or, now I'm just going to stay with the hand shovel and you can have the pneumatic, shovel over there. I mean, that we don't even think about that. I mean, we're automatically going to adopt those tools because we immediately see how it impacts our ability to do what we love doing. And Andy said, to work so we can live, so we can really have a legacy of these great projects. But I think the other side of it's true as well. And I think one of the things that gets lost is we often talk ourselves as builders, but, construction is a professional services industry. I mean, that's really what it is. No different than the, legal profession, accounting, you name it. We're a professional services business. And why wouldn't we use tools that include data to make that part of our industry just as better as we would moving from digging with our hands to using hand shovels to using pneumatic shovels as well? And so that's really my hope. And I actually, right, wrong, or indifferent, very optimistic about our industry. I really think that we have some of the best people in the world working in our industry. And they will do this. It just takes time, but in 10 years, hopefully, we'll look back at this conversation and say, remember we were talking about that? That seems so silly to talk about now because everybody's doing that. And so that's the way I look at it. I mean, it's a professional services business. It's about making good decisions is what a professional services business does. And having that data and that information, not to replace what's, kind of we know from our personal, and corporate experience, from just that gut knowledge, but is that additional aspect to round out, make us the best industry and the best decisions possible going forward. That's my hope 10 years from now.
I share your optimism, Jay. I think there's a ton of potential. And even as we were alluding to earlier with the influx in innovation and venture capital and a very strong focus on construction, this industry impacts every single human on the planet. And I think sometimes it's easy to forget that aspect because we're just in it in the built environment and we're, professionals working in this space, but it's just so important to improve and reduce waste and all these other things. And technology, I think, is going to be one of those levers of change that we get to pull that's going to really positively impact, not just our industry, but the entire world itself. So we're wrapping up to the end of the show. And as you can see, we've got 3 data nerds on the call today. So we went a little bit longer than usual, but I think that's okay because there's so much great insight here to just jump in and say, where do we get started? Like, we've really highlighted, okay, there's some challenges that our industry has. Those challenges are commonly shared across all the different stakeholders, regardless of project size or company type or location. But we have this incredible opportunity to really start making meaningful improvements in both in a revenue basis and just as a way we get work done. But I've got one final question that I ask each guest, and Jay, you've been through this one before, so I'm going to kick it to Andy first. But what is one tool that you will always carry in your toolbox, no matter what project you're working on?
I'll tell you, for me, it's going to be curiosity. It's as simple as that. Curiosity to ask the questions, to challenge things that are there. There's all kinds of tools in this world that you can use to get to those answers, but you have to start with the curiosity to at least care to know the answers. And so I think that's the most simplistic answer I can give you.
No, I think that's great. And in asking questions, it is a skill. It's not just something casual. They go, oh gosh, you have so many questions, we're tired of it. Like, having that onus to, one, care enough to ask the question, and then also the courage to ask the question, because it's uncomfortable asking questions sometimes, especially if somebody's uncertain of how they may be perceived by asking it. But being able to come to the table and, put that foot forward has an impact for, yourself as far as learning and bringing in new information, and ultimately the projects we work on, because it forces everybody to have what might be a difficult conversation, but also a meaningful one at the same time. So thank you for sharing that. Jay, how about you? What is your one tool that you will always carry to any project you're working on? And I know we've already made you do this one time, so I'm interested to see what comes out on round 2.
Well, it's called a toolbox for a reason, so it can hold multiple tools, right? But
you nailed it.
I will say one that maybe, I don't want to say it's a new tool, but it's one I'm really working to master. And it's a complementary sort of angle to what Andy mentioned, and that's listening. I've been really fascinated with a lot of the insights and thoughts of Julian Treasure. If you're not familiar with him, he talks about listening and the difference that listening is not the same as hearing. And one of the things he talks about is, that we should be listening 60% of the time and only speaking 40%. And how it's an easy trap to get into, where I'm not really listening. Like I'm already thinking about what's the next thing I'm going to say? How am I going to respond? And everything that person is sharing me, that information, if I have that curiosity that Andy's talking about, it doesn't matter if I'm not listening to what the other person is saying or what the other information coming at me is saying. And so really I've just been trying to really kind of see how I can put into practice and really master that listening aspect, as Julian Treasure has really kind of demonstrated more and more each day.
I appreciate that context, and you're absolutely right on. It's sometimes very easy to get into the position of, I'm waiting for my turn to say a thing now. And there's value there, and that's important sometimes. But being able to find that balance between, I'm consuming information because this person is sharing something important with me, and I also have something to add to the conversation is key. And Jim Lynch, actually, on the last episode, said the same thing, Jay. So you guys are in line as far as which tool you bring to the table. But we talked a little bit about how that changed in this world that we're in now, with a very heavy focus on video calls. So it's very easy to fall into, I'm here and I'm present, but I'm not necessarily listening, because I could be scrolling through, whatever website I wanted to check on the news or Facebook or whatever while you're sharing, your insights, but I'm not really actually listening. And so I think doubling down on the intentional and active listening is probably a good skill for all of us to have in this post-COVID semi-remote work-life balance that we're experiencing here. So I know both of you are working on some really exciting stuff and have a lot of external opportunities coming up. So I want to make sure I give you both an opportunity to share what's coming up and talk about anything that you're excited about right now. So Andy, is there anything you'd like to plug or share with our listeners?
I would say that not only are we working on things, we are growing at an amazing rate right now, and trying to keep up with that workload. And there certainly is always challenges with hiring people. So I'll tell you that we are absolutely hiring. So please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or on Twitter. Either way, I'm on Twitter at 3D Andy Leek. I'm more on LinkedIn. Just got to Google me. I'm pretty sure I'm the only guy here that works at PARIC in this role. So in that aspect, I'll tell you, the projects are just getting ever more challenging. I've been very fortunate in my role to speak at a lot of different industry events and help help kind of hopefully move the industry along and get buy-in. And we're really looking for people that are just, curious, excited about technology, excited about building, more about building than anything. I mean, the technology we can always teach, but we cannot teach people to be curious. We can't teach them to reach out and want to go for that next challenging project. I mean, the grit and determination to be in construction or even in pre-construction. And I think it's important to point that out that, we may spend 12 or 24 hours building, but we may have spent 12 or 24 months planning. And there's a tremendous amount of work and technology that goes into that part of the project as well, working with all of our design partners and all the folks that prefab things and so on. So there's plenty more coming down the pipeline in terms of new technology, new opportunities. We are fortunate to be a builder that is ready to move and go around the country and work on large and small projects. So by all means, if you're excited to come and work with somebody, let me know, because we got all kinds of great stuff going on.
I love this, Andy. This is a Digital Builder first as far as a recruiting moment on the show, but I really like it. And for anybody still out there listening, if you're interested, I mean, you've had an hour to listen to Andy speak about technology at this point. So if you like what he's saying, shoot him a LinkedIn message. We may have an opportunity here. It's great. Jay, how about you? Do you have anything you'd like to share with our listeners before they head off into the distance?
Sure. Well, I mean, the first I've got to say is just the excitement around being a part of the Harnessing the Data Advantage in Construction report. I mean, I really think this is just a really groundbreaking study that everybody in the industry should really look at. So it was really both an honor and a privilege to be a part of that. So really excited to see where this one goes. And then just secondarily, we'll have our next North America construction overview coming out towards the end of the year. It's not just, where's construction spending going, but it's, how is it going? What's changing from a composition standpoint and understanding, where the markets may be next year and the years after. And so you'll probably catch me on the speaking circuit talking about that a couple of times at the turn of the year. But other than that, those would be the big thing.
That's great, Jay. And I agree. The project that we worked on that report was an absolute pleasure to bring to life. It was a beast, but there's so much great insight in there. So if you're out there, absolutely worth checking it out. We've got infographics. There's a recap blog. If you jump on the Digital Builder blog, there's obviously an audiobook that I mentioned, and Jay and I are co-presenting on a webinar on October 28th, I believe, where we're going to get a little bit more into the data portion of this versus what we did today. It's a little easier when we've got visuals instead of an all audio format, so that'll be worth checking out and signing up for as well. And we'll include a link to that in the show notes. So outside of that, for those out there still listening, thanks for taking the time to join us on this episode of Digital Builder. If you've got any questions for me or want to appear on a future episode, you can find me on LinkedIn like everybody else, or via Twitter at builder_digital. And if you're enjoying the podcast, please do rate the show on Apple Podcasts or wherever you do listen to podcasts. All you've got to do is open the app, find Digital Builder, and select the number of stars that you think we deserve. It's that easy, and it makes a serious difference for my team, and my boss specifically would be very happy if those numbers go up. So please go out and like and rate the show. I would sincerely appreciate it. And then, of course, if you did like this episode, please share it with your friends. And on that final note, goodbye.
You've been listening to Digital Builder. To ensure that you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast player. If you're listening with Apple Podcasts, we'd love for you to give a quick rating of the show. Simply tap the number of stars you think the podcast deserves, and then you're done. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.